Go ahead, Dee.
But at what, at what cost? And I go back to what should be our national policy? What is our aspiration as a nation? And when we look at bilingual education as transitional, and I think part of the issue is the lack of definition. We use bilingual education when we're really talking about English as a second language. We use transitional when we really, so there's a real need for the advocates, for the educators, for the policymakers to help define what we mean. Bilingual education at the heart of hearts is dual language learning, and that should be a lifelong experience, that you're learning in multiple languages or in two languages, all of the skills and both your cognitive and your social skills, because there's a whole social aspect to why bilingual education is really critical, why children should retain their native language and their home language, because there's the links to family, there's the links to heritage, there's the links to identity. So it goes way beyond the classroom. So it's important for us to, I think, define, if we're talking about transitional bilingual or English as a second language, then we are talking about 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and we can all debate as how long it takes. We're all individuals and we all learn differently. But if we're talking about bilingual education, we're really talking about a lifelong process of learning and of educating and of really lifting our children to be part of a global society.
It's fine to say everybody learns at different rates, but shouldn't there be, built into the program, a goal for a kid where you say, by this year, ideally, they should be in a regular 5th grade class rather than in locked in the ghetto of this other instructional program inside the school walls.
That's the difference. That's the big difference there, is that is ESL. That is English as a second language. That's segregation of children. In a real bilingual education program, all children are learning both languages. Your dominant English speaking are learning Spanish, and they are becoming proficient in that language as well as their home language. And the dominant other language, whether it be Spanish or other, are retaining and learning in their home language and learning the second. So it is not a segregated model. It is an inclusive model.
Randy, go ahead.
So you have a micro and macro economic problem, and we have an aspirational want. And that's what's playing itself out right here. On the micro issue, school systems have an obligation to help all kids learn English and be able to deal in content long-term in English, because we're in the United States of America. But Bibi has a really important point here about how we as a country should, like other countries in this world, should be thinking about how dual language is important. And if we had that culturally in this country, this issue wouldn't go away on a micro basis, but on a macro basis, we wouldn't be having this debate in California or Arizona about English only versus that. But in a period of time of economic strife, we're not going to get to this in the next 2.5 nanoseconds. So what No Child Left Behind has said is that there is actually a limitation. And they do it, I don't like the way they do it, but they do it by saying that the assessments have to be taken in English in a particular period of time, within 2 or 3 years. So in some ways, at least under the old version of No Child Left Behind, there has been a limitation that has been set. But this is my issue with it. I'm not saying that that's a wrong limitation. Sometimes I think 1 year is much too short, 8 years is much too long, 3 years is probably the best period of time, but this is the big problem. The big problem is, what is the consequences of following the regulation in terms of kids? Because if we follow the regulation to a T and more kids drop out, that's not a good thing either.
That's not anybody's definition
exactly.
of working, of what works.
So what we should have is, there should be a norm of 3 years. And then there should be some sense of if a safety net for kids who don't make that norm. And we have to figure out a way, because systems, I wish that systems would deal with every individual child. That would be perfect in America, but they don't because of the resource issue. So we should have that norm and then have a safety net.
Well, there's 45 million kids in America between the ages of 5 and 18, and you know, I don't know if we can have we can have 45 million standards, but I think we're getting to the nub of what's difficult about building a program that responds to each individual kid's needs. Let's take a break. 2 out of 3 of all the students in the bilingual education programs in the United States are Hispanic, and the issue has become a rallying point for Hispanic leaders who view the program as a hard-won victory and are determined to keep it alive and keep opponents from breaking it apart. Ron Blackburn, has the debate over bilingual education become a front, a skirmish in the war over immigration?
I was going to mention that my fear and my concern is that it does become sort of intertwined with the whole immigration debate, and of course discrimination against Hispanic students, who constitute the majority of those who are in bilingual education programs. And I can see that in subtle ways in school districts around the country. Not only are these students segregated, but now they want to take them out of the No Child Left Behind accountability system. Once they take them out of the accountability system, then they can just do nothing with them. They don't have to provide the types of resources.
And when you say take them out of the
programs.
system, you mean what? No longer give them the standardized tests at grade level, so they don't pull down the average score?
There are certain districts that have actually made formal requests to the Department of Education to exclude English language learners from their accountability system, from the testing. Once you exclude them, there's no reason to provide any services to those students. There's no reason to teach those students because you're not being held accountable for those students. And I've seen that in many school districts. Of course, the Department of Education has been adamant, and they have to take those assessments. They have to be part of the assessment of the school. The school has to be judged based on their results with these students as well. And as the immigration debate becomes more heated, I think we're going to see even more conflict between the requirement in the school and the political will of the community to serve these students.
Don, we've seen in some places in the country where immigration is a new phenomenon, where largely the population is native born, a cultural and social debate, not an educational one, over whether it's a desirable thing for a teacher to get up in front of a classroom and speak to their students in a language other than English.
Mm-hmm. We more than 3/4, 3 out of 4 English learners in U.S. public schools today were born in the United States. As many of those kids are second-generation Americans as are immigrants themselves. Now, absolutely, teaching a kid who immigrates to the United States and say comes into a U.S. school in 4th grade with a vague sense of what their formal education was in the country that they came from is absolutely a challenge. But we're losing kids. We haven't talked about programs that might bring adult English learners to proficiency, to fully battle linguistic isolation. The fact that less than 1 in 4 English learners in U.S. elementary schools today is in fact an immigrant kid. We need to look at the larger picture and look at programs that can bring adults to proficiency. So that statistic, you're talking about kids who have come to the first day of kindergarten speaking only the household language, even though they were born here, they have not learned English. That's right. That's right.
So one of the things I proposed in July when I became the president of the American Federation of Teachers is a concept called community schools, which is essentially you make the school in the neighborhood the hub of the community, and you open the doors of that schoolhouse not just for kids during instructional periods of time, but for their parents and for others. You essentially have health care that's connected to the school. You have other social services connected to the school. But I would broaden that concept out, and this is what I said in last summer. Why don't we then also offer adult literacy courses at night? Why don't we offer courses to adults in terms of any kind of English immersion program, or any kind of bilingual program, so that parents whose first language is not English feel that the school becomes connected to them because the school is also offering them something important. And so that's the kind of concept that I think if we bring it back to real time, to today's time, there's a $5 billion new fund in the stimulus package called Race to the Top. I think it could fund some of these kinds of programs, and we can start addressing how we help parents, not simply how we help kids.